What's up guys, Asian here with our first build video of the Wolfhunter DLC pack. So we're going to start things off with the Stamina Nightblade because I know that's what everybody is going to want builds for. Stamina Nightblade, still top tier Stamina DPS, still the strongest Stamina DPS in the game right now. None of the other Stamina classes come close to topping out what the Stamina Nightblade is able to accomplish. Particularly with the new changes to backbar enchants, proccing off of weapon abilities while you're on your front bar. Everybody got a nice buff, but so that just kind of puts Stamina Nightblades even higher and Stamina DPS in general higher than Magic DPS again. Everybody got a nice buff with that change, but like I said, Stamina DPS, or Stamina Nightblades I should say, still rule the top of the pack. So, just like our previous build videos, we'll be going over our gear, our skills, our CPs, all of the food we eat, the potions that we're going to use, enchants, everything that you need to know in order to make this build your own. Now, one thing I do want to mention here is that this build is kind of optimized around trials groups. So if you're primarily a casual player that only does occasional dungeons, this build might not be the right build for you. Another thing that I do want to mention here before we go into all the build information is that this is not a set in stone build for every single fight in the game. You need to learn how to adapt as a DPS. You need to know what other sets you want to use, what other skills you want to use, and things like that, depending on your specific group. So with all that in mind, let's go ahead and get started first with our gear. So nothing much has changed between Somerset and Wolfhunter. So we're still using Selene as our monster helm. We still have the heavy shoulders with the health enchant because we are still using Dubious Camoran to help us sustain. We're still using Relequen. I have the perfect version here, but you can go with imperfect if you'd like. The extra stamina boost is nice, but it's not really going to suddenly boost you up 3 or 4k DPS. So you can only get the normal version, then that's perfectly fine to use instead of the perfect version. Now, this is the one set that you might need to swap out depending on the fight. So, for example, in fights we have to go from boss to boss. A good example of this would be in VMAW the Twins, or if you're doing Halls of Fabrication against the Fabrication Committee, that's the fourth boss. Relequen does lose a lot of power there because you're just swapping bosses a lot, so you're not able to gain all those stacks of damage from the 5-piece. So in that instance, you might need to wear something like War Machine, but the War Machines do stack on each other, so you might have to wear a different set piece. You might need to wear something like VO if you want to keep Minor Slayer, or you can do something like Hunting Rage if you don't have VO. And so this is the one set piece that you are going to want to potentially switch around with War Machine, VO, Hunting's Rage, just to kind of adapt to the fight and your group at hand. All this is all Divines, all of our armor is Divines. The only health enchant we have is going to be on one of our small pieces. I have it on my shoulder piece just because it's a heavy piece, so it kind of made sense at the time. And then everything else is just pure stamina and Divines. Now for our jewelry, we're still going with the second set with Advancing Yokeda. So still the strongest set. None of the other sets that were introduced in Wolfhunter, the medium armor sets from the 2 new dungeons, beat out Advancing Yokeda. So this is still going to be the set that you're going to want to use on your jewelry and your weapons, mainly because it's a heavy armor set, so you need to use jewelry and weapons. You can go with one armor piece because, again, it is a heavy set, and you do need that one health piece in order to kind of get your health up to an appropriate level. So you can do that if you'd like, but generally speaking, most people will go with the 3 jewelry and the 2 weapons. So our enchants are still weapon damage enchants, and I have 3 Bloodthirsty here. Generally speaking, Bloodthirsty is going to be the most consistent DPS. It might not always be the highest, but it will always perform well, no matter what. You can replace any of these traits with Infused if you would like. Infused is better than Robust just because Stamina DPS have more sources of weapon damage modifiers, so you have a higher modifier on your weapon damage compared to max stamina. So Infused is going to give you greater returns. So that's one other jewelry trait that you might want to keep in mind here. And yes, you can go with all 3 weapon damage glyphs and not have to worry about sustain, so you don't ever need to use anything like a stamina regen glyph as a Nightblade. Now for our front bar, our dual wield bar, we're going with double daggers here. So the traits have changed because of the way the backbar enchants now work. So we're still going with Nirn on the main hand, and this enchant, I have a disease enchant, but if you feel like you need a little bit more sustain, by all means, you can go ahead and swap to an Absorb Stamina enchant if you would like. It's kind of up to you and how you feel with your own sustain. The DPS difference is obviously going to be noticeable. Disease will pull higher if you're able to sustain it, the key word there is if you're able to sustain it. So if you try out the disease glyph and after a couple of trial runs you feel like you can't sustain, then by all means swap over to the absorb stamina glyph. You'll be losing about 1k DPS or so, but you know, that's in exchange for easier time to sustain. So that's kind of the trade-off that you have to make there with the main hand glyph. The offhand is now going to be precise. It was infused, but they did fix the bug, so precise is the best offhand trait now with a weapon damage enchant. And then for our back bar, we're still going with the Maelstrom Bow. Maelstrom Bow is still the strongest bow, but now we have a change in enchants and well as traits. So because the back bar enchant will now go off while you're on your front bar if you have a weapon damage ability that was cast on your back bar. So in this case, Endless Hail, it'll proc the poison damage enchant while you're on your front bar, and it'll remember if it was infused or not. So because of this change, we now have an infused Maelstrom Bow with a poison damage enchant instead of running Nirn with double Ravage health poisons. It's still a good choice. Nirn with double Ravage health poison still good, pulls very good DPS, but if you're trying to push out that last 1 or 2k, this is what you're going to want to do, infuse the poison damage enchant here. Now moving on to our character sheet, so this is kind of all kind of general information. So Nightblade, I am a Wood Elf. Wood Elves are not the best race. If you want to be the best race, you will want to be a Redguard. Redguards get that 10% additional stam, plus the additional stamina regen back from Adrenaline Rush. So that's really, really nice for sustain, particularly as a Nightblade. Bosmer, the Wood Elves here, like I have here, aren't a bad choice. They get 6% additional max stam and 200% max stamina regen, so that's nice for sustain. Another option would be Khajiits, the cats. They don't get any additional max stam. They do get, I believe it's 10% stamina regen, but they also get, I want to say it's 8% additional weapon crit. So it just helps you get even more crit chance out of your abilities. And because Nightblades have that 10% additional crit damage modifier, Khajiits do very good DPS as a Nightblade. Of course, the trade-off is you are losing a fair amount of sustain when you're a Khajiit, so that's just something to keep in mind. And finally, if you do have access to the Imperial Edition, you can be an Imperial if you'd like. They get, I want to say 12% max health and 10% max stamina. You're kind of trading off the sustain, but if you're Imperial, you don't need to have points in the health, don't necessarily need to run a heavy piece in order to get up to a good health level. So that's kind of a trade-off that you have to make. So each of the races have their own sort of trade-offs there, but Redguards generally are going to be the best when it comes to racial options. Now, in terms of attribute points, you see here I have 10 in health, 54 to stamina, and that's just because I'm a Wood Elf. So like I mentioned earlier, if you're Imperial, you actually don't need to put any points into health at all in order to get to around 70k health. So that's a bonus of being an Imperial. But if you're any of the other races that I mentioned earlier, you are going to want to have 10 points in the health and 54 points in the stamina in order to get up to an appropriate level of health. Now you can always take points out of health, put it in stamina, and just go pure DPS if you'd like. But you are trading off some survivability because we aren't actually using Deadly Cloak here in this particular build, so that's something you do want to keep in mind if you do decide to go the full DPS route. For our Mundus Stone, we're still sticking with the Lover, just because of the changes to Nightmother's Gaze and Thunderflame. Those are here to stay. So we are all going with the Lover. Stamina DPS are all using the Lover right now, unless they're using something like Twice Fanged Snake on the body, in which case you would want to use the Warrior instead. And that's pretty much it. For food, we are going with Dubious Camoran Throne. There is a gold food that came out with Somerset. I don't remember what it's called. Something like Cedric Broth or something like that. That's basically a slightly upgraded version of Dubious Camoran Throne, which basically gives you a little bit better stats overall. But Dubious is perfectly fine. As far as I know, that gold stamina food is super, super expensive, so don't feel like you have to dish out the cash for it. Now for our skills, we'll start off with our front bar here. So we have Killer's Blade, this is our Execute, we have Surprise Attack, this is our primary spammable. Rending Slashes, if you want the extra, the heal morph, Blood Race, you can certainly go with that, it's not that big of a DPS loss. Relentless Focus, and then we have Rearming Trap here on the front bar for the additional weapon damage boost. Then Flawless Dawnbreaker for the, again, weapon damage boost. We're not going to be using this as our primary damage ultimate. Now, I do want to mention here that we don't have Deadly Cloak here. So this is kind of really optimized around a group that really knows what they're doing, whose healers are really on top of keeping your DPS alive and things like that, and have really high group DPS. If you want the additional survivability, by all means, you could swap out Rearming Trap with Deadly Cloak and give yourself a little bit of that damage mitigation, which really helps out your survivability. And of course, survivability is a key component of being a good DPS. And for our back bar, we have Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Leeching Strikes, and we do have Rearming Trap again. You can replace this with something like Vigor if you'd like. It's kind of up to you. Rearming Trap just down here again for the weapon damage boost from the Battery Scope passive, but like I said, this is kind of a free spot, so you can kind of use something like Vigor if you'd like, if you want additional like self-heal. And we have Incapacitating Strike. This is going to be the ultimate that we use the most for damage. It's just because it's so cheap. It does have a unique debuff, which basically allows you to deal more damage against whatever you hit. It's 20% additional damage, which is really nice to have there. Now moving on to our champion points. So with Wolfhunter, our max CP is now 780, which gives us 260 CP for each of the 3 different constellation types. So starting off with the Lover, we have 75 Mooncap, 75 Tenacity. That hasn't changed, and that likely will never change. And then in terms of the other nodes, you can kind of split them however you like. It's kind of up to you how you want to do it. So I have 40 Shadow Ward, 40 Tumbling. That hits the jump points there. And then I have 30 into Warlord, which just misses the 31 jump point, but the number of green CPs we have, it's basically you're going to have to miss a jump point with one of those 3 if you decide to go with those 3 routes. Now for our blue CPs, we have 61 to Master at Arms, 51 in the Thaumaturge, 66 in the Precise Strikes, 18 into Piercing, and 64 into Mighty. Now, you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is constellations for my most recent parse, and it does say you can put a little bit more points into Precise Strikes and take them out of Thaumaturge. That is certainly an option if you would like to do so. I personally am sticking with this kind of setup here, but again, you can follow constellations if you would like. It's kind of up to you if you want to do it. CP changes generally are going to be usually less than 1% difference in DPS overall, as long as you are obviously making wise decisions with where your CPs are going. Finally, for our red CPs, this is for damage mitigation and trials. So the distribution you see here is kind of a balanced approach, so that way you kind of have good mitigation across all the different trials in the game, but you don't have the best damage mitigation. So if you do want the best damage mitigation, you will need to shift some points around. So you have 66 to Ironclad, 56 in the Thick Skin, 64 into Hardy, Elemental Defender, and then we have 10 points of Quick Recovery for the Field Physician passive. As a stamina DPS, you generally will not be resurrecting people just because your stamina DPS, you don't have shields. You have Deadly Cloak, but you don't have a shield to help eat any damage. So generally speaking, you won't be asked to resurrect players, but if you are going to res players, it's nice to have that damage mitigation from Field Physician. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about our rotation, because this is a little bit different from my previous builds where I used to use Deadly Cloak all the time. So just talking right now about our rotation, the biggest skills you want to maintain are obviously going to be your buff skills. So that's going to be Leeching and Relentless. Leeching for the sustain, and then Relentless for the bow procs. And of course you also want to try to maintain Might of Force from the Rearming Trap. So I like to use Action Duration Reminder to remind me when I have to put down my second trap, because it's a little bit better than Strendar when it comes to monitoring when that second trap goes off. And then obviously you want to maintain Endless Hail, Razor Caltrop, Poison Injection. All your back bar stuff is pretty important to maintain because those stats end up becoming pretty strong, particularly Endless Hail and Poison Injection during the execute phase. But that's also because you want to maintain them, because if you do Endless Hail on your back bar and swap to your front bar, that Poison Enchant on your Maelstrom Bow is still going to be going off. Now it is important that you use Endless Hail first in your rotation because of the way the Maelstrom Bow works. There's a slight delay with when damage actually starts with Endless Hail. So it's about a 2-second delay here. So you can see here there is a delay between when the animation ends and when the arrows actually start to go. So you do want to make sure that the first takes do happen with Endless Hail on your back bar before you swap to your front bar. That's just to make sure that you get the Maelstrom Bow effect going. Then on your front bar, obviously you just use Rending Slashes, and then Rearming Trap, you're going to apply that while you're on your front bar here. This has kind of 2 effects here. The first one is obviously the additional weapon damage boost that you get while you're on your front bar. You get 3% additional weapon damage. That's really nice. But one of the other things is it reduces the amount of time that we have to be on our back bar. So on our back bar now we have 3 main spambles, and then of course Leeching Strikes, which we will re-up every now and then, which basically allows us to have slightly better uptime on Berserking Warrior because we're on our back bar less often. So that's one of the reasons why we have Rearming Trap and try to use that on our front bar here. So real quick with a kind of rotation demonstration here, you're obviously going to want to put down all of your back bar stuff first. You want to pre-buff for every fight with Leeching and Relentless Focus. And then if you want, you can open up with Rearming Trap. But you always start, like I said, with Endless Hail. Then I do Caltrops, Incap, Poison Injection. Now you can go the other way, you can go Poison Injection, Incap, it's kind of up to you. And then the front bar. Now if Leeching Strikes is down, I generally like to do it after I put down Endless Hail, but it's kind of up to you when you want to use it. That's basically the rotation. It's kind of simple. It's not terribly difficult. And there is kind of the aspect of making it dynamic if you'd like. So what I did right there was kind of a more static rotation. But if you want to do something like a dynamic rotation, what you would do is you would actually go swap to your front bar when the bow proc goes off. See if I can make it happen again. And then go back to your back bar and finish off your parse, your rotation that way. So I'll go to my front bar here, and then swap from the back bar, do the endless poison injection, and then go back to my front bar here. Again, that's kind of up to you if you want to do that or not. Now for execute, I kind of went through that real quick, but for execute, you do want to drop a few dots here. So typically speaking, most standard DPS will drop Rending Slashes, and they will also drop Razor Caltrops. So you will only maintain Endless Hail, Poison Injection, obviously Leeching Strikes, and Relentless Focus. And then you would, instead of using Surprise Attack, you would just use Killer's Blade instead as your primary ultimate. You would, or Spamble, you'll still maintain Minor Force through Rearming Trap. Some people even drop Leeching Strikes during Execute. It all depends on how long Execute phase is. If it's going to last like 30 seconds or something like that, you might want to drop it. If it lasts 15, definitely want to drop it. But if it lasts anywhere like greater than maybe like 30 seconds, I would probably try to maintain it if you can, just because it is nice to have that additional sustain there. Alright, so with all of that kind of in mind, we're going to go ahead with our 6-minute dungeon parts so you guys can get an idea of what kind of DPS you're able to pull. I will be doing a static rotation, so if my bow proc happens to go up while I'm on my back bar, I will not swap to my front bar to get the bow proc off and swap back. I will stay on my back bar for the entire duration of the rotation. It does mean I do slightly less DPS, but I find it more comfortable, and it is quite a shift to go from a static rotation to a dynamic rotation. I do recommend you try to move to a dynamic rotation if you can, but it will take a lot of practice in order to get there, and I'm not quite at a level of comfortableness on my dynamic rotation that I can pull as good DPS with a static rotation just yet. So let's go ahead and get started with this parse. Now I do like to do heavy attacks every once in a while. That's just to help me maintain, sustain myself. Generally speaking, if I can see I can get a heavy attack off before Endless Hail ends, I will do it. Basically, if there's like 2 seconds left on the Endless Hail timer there. I'm going to drop Caltrops and Rending Slashes. And there we go, that is our parse there. So we're not quite as good as I had it before. I did a parse earlier just to kind of test things out, and I did manage to pull 51.1. And I have obviously managed to do a little bit higher before. I managed to go, I think, up to like 52, 53k, but I'm on my laptop, so it's not quite as responsive sometimes. So this is a comp metrics parse though, so you can see here Berserking Warrior is about 90% uptime. So one thing that you can do to make this 100 is actually you can do a light attack before swapping to your bow bar, your back bar, and instead of light attacking before Endless Hail on your bow bar, you just go straight into Endless Hail. So that's one thing you can do. I believe Lyco and Warfire on the EU server actually recommend doing that to help maintain Berserking Warrior uptime. And it does help, it just takes a lot of practice in order to kind of get out of a certain mindset here. So you can see here, Endless Hail is our strongest dot here, 14.1% of our DPS. On the Relequen, still very strong here. Killer's Blade, really, yeah, this is an incredible execute, and we got really lucky with our crits here, so 11 out of 12 were crits, so really, really nice to have there. The bow proc here is also pretty strong. Now, one thing I forgot to mention for execute is you actually don't want to use Assassin's Scourge if you can help it, just because if you take a look here at average versus max, there's obviously going to be a disparity there. So you can see there's about a 15k or so difference in our average hits. So you want to maintain Killer's Blade, not Assassin's Scourge, because that Killer's Blade is going to hit for a lot more compared to Assassin's Scourge. And then we can see our poisoned weapon is going off pretty much all the time because of that enchant. So it's really important that we manage to maintain Endless Hail, so that way we can get our poison enchants off as much as we can. And everything kind of just goes down from there. So that is it for this build video. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. Again, this is not a perfect build. This is not a static build. You can obviously switch things around depending on your own needs. So if you guys have any sort of specific questions, please feel free to, again, leave them down in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.